And then when I was going through the human trafficking, I had guns put in my mouth. I had, I watched bodies being put in barrels in acid. So yes, trauma was there.
Welcome to the show, Kelly.
Thank you. How are you doing?
So, I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm okay.
What is your sober date?
Um, I don't exactly know my sober date. Well, let's see. I went to, I was in jail actually.
Okay.
Um, when I when I decided, because I had been in jail many, many times. Um, um, it was around 2017, maybe 219.
Okay. And what were you in jail for this time?
Um, Drunk driving.
So, is alcohol your drug of choice?
No, everything was my drug of choice. That's true.
No, I believe it because if I laugh, it's because I'm relating to you.
Yes,
Because I understand, I always say it in meetings, especially that I was addicted to more.
right.
It didn't matter what it was. I just wanted more of that takes away that void that my grief and loss was my thing.
Oh yeah.
And that's why I would be drinking or using. So let's rewind. Do you have any siblings?
I have an identical twin sister.
Okay.
Yes,
And
and
did she fall into addiction as well? I'm always,
absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely
Okay. How was growing up for you?
horrible.
Was it in South Carolina?
South Carolina. Yes,
Okay,
sir.
the accent is strong. I lived in North Carolina for a year,
Yes.
so I can always pick up on those kind of accents. Now,
Mhm.
you said horrible. Did you like? How did you grow up? One parent, both parents?
I I grew up with both parents. But it was a very traumatic childhood. Um,
Can you elaborate on what was traumatic?
um,
If you can't, that's fine. I'm
it
just
okay.
curious.
My sister and I grew up very much with a mommy dearest. That's the best way I can say it.
What does that mean?
Um, my mother, I'm not going to use any names, with things because of their privacy. Because we're still healing. A
Yeah.
lot of us are healing,
Yep.
and I believe in generational curses. For me, this thing was generational, and it got worse and worse. And I believe with my sister and it, it it definitely was a generational curse. Um, the best way I can say is we ran. My sister and I were running. Um, we had a really good father, but my mother was abusive to him also. Um, he did not
Well,
protect us. He did not protect us as kids. Um,
were you verbally abused or physically abused by your mom?
both.
Like
Absolutely.
hitting you?
I'm talking about burning, putting us in hot showers that we could not get out of. Uh, we were laid in the beds, or I was, just with cold sheets, and the sheets felt like ice because those kinds of
No,
things happen.
you said generational. Does that mean they also happened to your mom?
I have no idea. My mom does not talk about stuff like that. I do not know. I don't know really what happened to my mom. Um, sh
Is
sh
she still in your life?
yes, she
Okay.
is. Um, I made a choice in recovery that I had to forgive my mom. Because the unforgiveness, it was killing me.
Eating
Like
you
cancer.
alive.
It was like a cancer. It kept growing and growing. The bitterness, the anger. Um, um, I had to forgive my mom for myself.
Yeah.
You know, 'cause people were like, how can you forgive your parents?
Now, did you go through any programming? Like, I was big in NA and AA. So, going through the
Been to all of
steps.
them. I went to
Okay.
Celebrate Recovery, which is all over the nation.
Yep.
Um, you know, I
Which
struggled.
one?
I
Which one
really
worked?
struggled.
Which
For
one
me,
worked? Yeah. Which one worked best for you?
um, Celebrate Recovery was the first part of it. I had relapse after relapse after relapse, and there's no shame in relapse. Um,
They're all just important lessons to learn.
right. That there was no shame in that. For me, I had to go to a human trafficking program in Alabama.
Were you
Um,
trafficked?
yes, sir. Yes, sir. For
Uh,
10 years.
When did that start? What age?
In my 20s, in my late 20s.
Now, can you elaborate for people what? Because there's a whole spectrum. You know what I mean of like being trafficked.
Well,
Um,
mine was a man that I was with, um, um, a man that I was with. He was actually a boyfriend, and um, anyways, he used manipulation and control, um, and it became a part of my life.
does that mean like he would take you to other guys to sell your body and
Absolutely,
like
absolutely, friends, absolutely. It was very painful. Um, it was very traumatic.
I'm sure it didn't help the drinking at all.
No, or the drugging.
Yeah.
I had to use more and more drugs, because I could not face with my reality. I absolutely could not face it.
So was that DUI because of drugs or DUI from drinking?
Both.
Okay, so
Both.
they got you on both. And
Yeah, it
and
did.
and you said that was or was not your first DUI.
That was my first. No, well, no, it wasn't. It was not my first DUI. I had one, but I fought it and I won in the state of North Carolina. But I was high.
Yeah.
That's the bad thing about it. Um, I was absolutely high. Um, but I was on prescription medications.
Gotcha.
Um,
Me too.
it doesn't make it any better.
No, I
But
was prescribed Oxy and Xanax.
oh yes, I was on oxycodone. So okay.
The blue ones?
No, I was on totem poles and,
Okay.
and oxycodone. Um, but I'm talking about for like 7 years. I was on all that. I'm talking about high doses. Probably I was taking probably like 60 milligrams, and then I was also on morphine on
Gotcha.
top of it, and I was on morphine, like 60
Sometimes
milligrams the time released.
sometimes the doctors think they're helping him, but really they're keeping us sick. Like I was on 100, like I was prescribed 120 milligrams a day, but I was doing like 300 milligrams a day
Yes.
of the oxycodone because I was getting a script of 30 milligrams, the little blue ones,
Yeah.
and I was a snorter. That
Mhm.
was my thing was snorting pills or snorting coke. I would do a lot of candy flipping and take a bunch of pills and then do a bunch of coke.
Mhm.
I'm not proud of it, but it's definitely part of my story nonetheless.
Right. Right.
How were your teenage years?
Teenage
When
years.
did you discover drugs and alcohol as a way to cope?
Um, I wasn't real bad into addiction in my teenage years.
Okay,
Um,
so like I had my first drunk at in 6th grade. So I
my
wasn't sure how well when was it like That's when I started going overboard and became an alcoholic.
Right. Well, for me, it really started in my 20s.
Oh, so you were a
But
late bloomer.
yes, I was late bloomer. and and you know, I had an affair on my husband. I had 2 children. Had an affair on my husband, and
Was the affair had anything to do with drinking or using?
absolutely,
Was the
absolutely,
new guy that you were seeing somebody that was enabling?
absolutely,
So
absolutely, yes,
did you leave your husband for the guy that trafficked you?
sure did.
Look
Yep.
at that. Just
So
doing the
there
math.
was, yep, and you know, the thing about it is, you know, after that was my destruction, my absolute destruction, because I felt so guilty, you know, about
Were you seeing your
leaving
kids
my
during this
children
time?
very rarely, because
I
I
mean, you're
was just
being
dealing with so
trafficked.
much
You,
pain.
yeah.
That started a little later.
Okay.
Um, I just stayed high all the time. I was high all the time. And I mean, when I say all the time, I'm talking about all the time.
Yeah.
I
Wake up
was,
until bedtime.
right. I mean, but I was up for days. I'm talking about sometimes weeks.
Was it the
I
meth? Was it meth or coke?
meth, absolutely. And
I have a
I
sponsee that
didn't
went
know if
32
I
days
didn't,
a week.
yeah, I didn't know if I was coming or going.
Yeah.
And when I would get around my family, they knew I was higher than a kite. I didn't know I was higher than a kite, but they did. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I had no recollection of really anything, to be honest. And when I did pick up my kids, I was high, you know. But I did not realize this is my niece behind me. But I did not realize the destruction that that I was causing. You know, my children, my family, um, and then it became a point where my family would not speak to me, and I didn't care.
Are you on better terms with your mom and dad now?
I have not seen my dad in 3 years.
Okay.
My dad, when I came back from the human trafficking program, my dad left my mom,
He was with,
and
even though she
after
was that abusive, he was with her for that long.
for 40 something years, 48
Holy
years.
shit.
Yes, and let me tell you, this stuff goes deep in my soul.
Yeah,
Uh,
generational trauma is just now becoming something talked about. Like, there's been generational trauma for years, but
mhm.
this is like, I'm learning through talking to people. Like I said, this is my 123rd episode, so you hear some things.
Right, right.
So generational trauma is extremely real, and it's all about breaking the chain of, it's this way you don't pass it along to your kids.
But see, my sister. I can't say anything about my sister's story because it's different than mine, a little different. My sister wound up having 5 kids,
Is one of them
and
behind you?
yes, she sure is. Yeah, and some of these things have been passed on to her kids, and um, you know, it's hard to see the damage that I have done to like my own children. I don't even speak to one of my daughters, but it's not by my choice.
Yeah,
She,
this is.
this is something that she's having to deal with, and I have to respect her boundaries. You
Yeah.
know, um, I used to not respect any kind of boundary. I had no
There was
boundaries.
no boundary. Yeah.
There was no boundaries. You know, I had to learn by healing.
Yep.
And let me tell you, I stayed high for like 20-something years, 30-something years.
So was there anything traumatic that really? Because like I started drinking at 11, but I didn't become an alcoholic until I was 13. So like, and when I say I was an alcoholic when I was 13, I wasn't drinking every day because you're not an alcoholic because you can drink a lot. You're an
Right.
alcoholic because you drink to forget. And
Right.
you so there's the difference. And when I was 13, I was being bullied, and that's when like the shit was hitting the fan for a lot of different personal things. And that's when, like I said to my buddy, if we drink, we're gonna feel better. So that right there is the alcoholism talking. And
Hmm.
by the time I was a senior in high school, we drank every day. But my inciting incident that started me off as an alcoholic was grief and loss. I lost a friend who was hit by a car. And then on top of that, my best friend's father was diagnosed with leukemia, both in the same week. And
Hmm.
I specifically remember saying to my friend whose dad just was diagnosed with leukemia, I said, if we drink, we're going to feel better, man. And so right then and there is how I became an alcoholic.
For me,
So was there
I'm
any inciting incident for you that you can remember the switch turn on to being like, I'm going to drink or I'm going to use?
well, for me, um, my I was raped at 15.
Okay.
Um,
By a friend or by family?
um, it was a friend. Um, but it was a violent rape, and I mean, I can remember blood being all over the room, and I remember being on the porch with my best friend, and I couldn't believe it. I was like, I just couldn't believe it.
Were you
And,
drunk or high?
yep, I was at a party. Um, but see, I couldn't tell anybody. My best friend knew. My twin sister found out. Um, but I really couldn't tell anybody because I was at a party I wasn't supposed to be at. And at this time, I had moved in with my aunt and uncle. My dad also has an identical twin brother, and we
Oh,
had moved
shit.
in. Yeah. Yes, I'm telling you. And then when I was going through the human trafficking, I had guns put in my mouth. I had I watched bodies being put in barrels in acid. So yes, trauma was there. It was trauma. Yes. Um, and then when the trafficking took place, I was taken state to state.
So that's
This
where
was
the yeah,
nice.
that's where the for people that don't know, when you're driven from state lines, shit, if you're driven from point A to point B, and the intention was usually related to sex, that's human trafficking right there.
Absolutely.
Usually the person providing the ride will take most of the money that you made doing
All
the
of
act,
it. Most, all of it.
but
I
did
had
they
never had money.
but they fed you with drugs though to keep you like high.
Hmm. Yep, and you
Okay.
were given like small portions.
Yeah, like a fucking allowance that you get as a kid.
Yep.
Yeah, you're
I
not. I
I
have had
never
people on from
phones.
Ohio that were trafficked all over.
I never had phones. I was not able to contact my family, but also I was told, that my children would be killed. So, I did not want my children killed.
How did you meet this guy?
Through a friend, through a friend,
Like,
and
did his friend say, "Oh, if you hook up with this guy, he'll make sure you stay high"? Or
no, it started out as a boyfriend girlfriend that thing, and I did not know that this was going to be a part of our relationship.
did you
I
guys
did.
start using together?
Yes, yes.
and
heavily.
then you ran out of money, and then
Um,
he said, I have an idea. If I take you to
yep,
this person, we can make
yep,
some money.
yes. And then it started over the state lines.
Was that
And then it
Craigslist?
started
Were they
with,
finding people on Craigslist or some shit? Sorry if
this
I curse a
started
lot. I can't help it.
back then, it was phone lines. It was this, this did not have the setup that it has now.
Yeah.
Um, so it started on phone lines. Um, and also, you know, I look at all the motels in Greenville. I live in the Greenville County area and of South Carolina, and it just amazes me. A lot of these motels are still here, and and they trigger me when I ride by them. They trigger me.
Now, when was the last time that you can recall being trafficked? Like 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 15
Oh
years ago?
no, no! I got into a my trafficker took me to Yakinville, North Carolina. This is a small town in North Carolina. And he actually was convicted of harming me. And
Okay, so that was my next follow up was did he ever like serve any was there any repercussions to him?
he 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 um he was facing 60 years
Good.
because he was on top of me trying to strangle me.
Good.
And the Yakinville Police Department, they kicked the door down in a motel, and and you know they got
Is
him.
is he still in jail today?
No, he's on the run currently. I know where he's at,
Oh,
but yeah,
so
I know where
he
he's
was
at.
facing 60 years and then he, went
He
into
served.
hiding.
No. He no. He went to prison,
Oh, okay.
and he went to prison, and he went to prison, but he only served like 7 years, 5 years. I don't know, 5 7 years, something like that, of his sentence.
Then he got out for good behavior.
I guess. I guess. I'm not really sure, but he was charged with sex crimes, and
The punishment is not high enough for these people.
right, absolutely, because the mental damage that it does to you as a female, um, because I had to fight for my life. I had to I had to survive. That's my life for many years was just survival. It was all I knew. And and women on the streets, they learn to hate each other because they're at such conflicts.
And
You know,
competition.
absolutely. And women are taught to be against each other, not to be like, I don't know, they're taught to fight. And it's sad because in recovery, you're taught to be there for each other.
Yep.
You're taught different.
Yeah,
And, and sorry.
yep. I've had somebody on my show that accidentally was trafficking.
Mhm.
What happened was her and her good friend were both on the streets and they would give each other rides to meet with the Johns. And usually, while one person was like doing their work, the other one of them was going to get the drugs with the money they made. And they both had to serve time in Canada for human trafficking because they were driving each other back and forth. And it's crazy because Canada is legal to be a prostitute. It like it's not that nobody's ever arrested for that.
I didn't
Um,
know.
the loophole to that is you can arrest them for trafficking if they're driving people to meet up with somebody. That's the loophole that they use in Canada is like you gave this person a ride, so this is human trafficking. So it's so weird because like I've interviewed people all over the world, so everywhere has different rules.
Yeah.
And South Carolina now, what are you doing today for your sobriety? Is it to celebrate recovery? Is it AA or NA? Are you doing it yourself, white knuckling it?
No.
Is it the
There's
church?
a there's an organization called Switch in Upstate. Um, they've been a part of my life for 3 years.
Okay.
That they they act they actually came into the jail. I don't know how they ever did this. I believe it was I believe it was a Spartanburg County um, jailer who reached out for me. And they realized how much pain I was in, you know, and they reached out to somebody and with Switch.
Okay.
Switch is a an organization in the upstate that fights human trafficking.
Well, at
They go
least there,
after
yeah, at least there's programs like that locally that, are doing those kinds of things.
not many
Because,
of there are not many of them. Like, you know, it really um it's a billion. I mean billions and billions of dollars, and they're using babies. I mean, this is a real problem. This is a real problem in our nation.
yeah,
Nation.
I've been trying to shed lights on it as much as I could because I've had people on the show, like I said, that were trafficking each other. I've actually had two people on the show that were trafficked by the same guy, and they hadn't seen each other since like getting help and getting out of that situation. I interviewed both of them together about, why it was happening, what was happening, when it was happening, how it was happening. So I've definitely, I don't want to say I've grown numb to it, but I can listen to these stories without going, oh my God, I got to get high now. In fact,
Right.
it's the total opposite where I'm grateful for my recovery that I can actually help people like you get your story out there. Um, and so you left because your parents, you said you didn't get high until your 20s. Now,
Right.
now your first marriage, when did you meet him?
15.
Was
I was
it
15.
school together, or
Yeah. No,
was
I
he an
met him
older man?
after. I met him after. Well, I, he had already graduated high school,
That's what I
but
mean. Was he an older guy when you met him?
yeah, I mean, like not that older. I mean, he's like maybe 5 years older.
Oh, okay, okay, that makes
Uh,
more sense.
yeah. And then I tried to live a normal life, but I did not realize how much, the rape and being with my mother, the psychological damage. I did not realize how much it had affected my sister and I. But see, my sister didn't. It didn't happen to my sister till later. You know,
Now, were you with your husband, with your first husband, when you were 17 and raped?
I was 15.
You were 15.
I was 15 when I was raped. Yes,
Okay,
and
and
yeah, but I got with my husband after.
Now,
You know,
did that person face any kind of criminal, or
no.
no, because you couldn't really report it, or you weren't comfortable reporting it because this was probably in the 90s when that happened.
Uh, yeah.
So
See, no, my son was born in '92. No, it was in the '80s.
so even less reporting was happening in the 80s. I
Absolutely.
I would say reporting has only become common in the last 5 years.
That was absolutely. And see, things like that, you got to realize when I was growing up, that was like in the '80s. Child abuse was not talked about. You know,
No, you could hit
child,
your kid and get away with it in the 80s,
right. This, my mom was charged 3 times with child abuse.
and she
So,
still kept being able to be a mom.
absolutely. We were kept in the home. We were, uh, Greenville County knew all about it. And the worst thing about it was my mother was a school teacher. Yes, sir.
Jeez.
40 years, Greenville County. Yes, sir.
That's wild that she had to care for students, but yet she couldn't even. Was it just you and your sister, or any other siblings?
No, just me and my sister.
How close
And
were you
we
two?
were told constantly that we were hated by our mother. Um, I can remember her looking at me straight in the face in the bathroom, and she would look at me. This is how it was, like daily. She would say, like, I hate you, and grab the back of my head and throw it into the sink. I had busted lips. Um, I had glass taken out of my shoulder. I mean, you know, she threw a glass at me, and I had glass all in my shoulder. She wouldn't take me to a hospital. My sister tried to commit suicide at 11 years old. I was there at home by myself. Um,
Yeah, like you two can watch each other at 11. When did she start leaving you guys alone? How old were you?
um,
9, 10.
we were left alone all the time. Yeah, but we just, you know,
I don't want to be
we
seeming.
survived.
Yeah, I
We
don't want like suicide hits close to me. I had my first fiance kill herself 7 years ago. So I understand how much it can take out, but I've also seen a lot of people with attempts.
Yeah,
Um,
I did
how
it myself 3 or 4 times, or
how
more than that. More
when
than
you
that.
were that age, or when you were like doing drugs later on?
Later on. Later on. Yep.
Were you a cutter?
At times, I mean, um, I
People
burned up
cut people cut for attention. That's I
I,
mean,
I, I burned, I burned up my own home.
and this
Sure.
was after she was putting out cigarettes on you guys,
Um,
girls, I should say.
yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, but it was during and after. Yes, yeah. It was, and that's what I'm saying. This trauma carried on throughout my life.
How's your sister now?
My sister was almost killed in a car accident about 6 months ago. Um, my sister, I can't speak much about her story, but because that's her story. But she, or I'm taught that. I was taught that. I went to like I told you, in Alabama, a human trafficking program, and you know, we all have a story. We all have a story, and I went to a Christian program, and that's where I'm just going to say that's where I found God. That's where, you know, that's where I started my healing, my true healing. And um, I thank God for that
Are
because
you
I did.
married today? Are you married today?
I am.
And
I'm
how
married
long?
to,
How
married,
long have you known him?
oh, I only knew him less than 20 something days.
When you got married?
Yep.
That's funny. I mean, I proposed to my wife within the first 30 days. So I get it. She was going through a divorce, and we were already engaged within a month of dating. It was funny. You know how in AA there's that rule where you shouldn't date people for your first year?
Yep.
Her and I met 11 months into my recovery. So I kept telling her, I love you, but we can't do anything, no relationships
Right.
and then I came back.
We.
I celebrated my 1 year clean in LA because that's where I got sober was Los Angeles. So I flew out there for my 1 year. And when I came back, I proposed because I was a
Yeah.
year sober then. So I was like, all right, time to propose.
Yeah.
So, I get the fast ones. I understand. How old were you when you met him and within 20 days? Were you
About three
already
years ago.
was
About
it?
two or about 3 years ago.
So he's never seen you drunk.
Um. Oh, he's seen me drunk. Yes.
Oh,
He,
okay.
because I'm not gonna say drunk, but
But he
like
was
when this
after
first
the
started.
using.
Yeah. Yeah. That we actually because I told you I'd relapsed three
Yeah.
times,
Oh,
and
okay.
I relapsed, because I was so nervous about starting a relationship. I mean, it struck fear in me,
Yeah.
and uh, I'm not gonna say much about the relationship, but you know, yeah, I'm married.
That's all that matters. And now you still go to church and that's like part of your recovery?
Absolutely. Um, God is a big part of my life. If I don't wake up in the morning, and pray and have
Set intentions?
excuse me,
Like like setting intentions for your
yeah,
day.
intention. I have to do. I have to. For me, with my sobriety, this is my belief. God brought me out of that jail cell. There are so many things that happened through my life, um, where I
Well,
know He saved me. I know He did.
when was the first time you were arrested?
I can't tell you all the times I got arrested. I was high every single one of them, and
Were they all for paraphernalia? Were they all for drugs? Were they all for
all of
DUIs?
all of it. I, I'm telling you, my
How
rap
many
sheet was so long.
how many DUIs do you have?
Well, I had two, but I fought one of them.
And you got arrested for was did you ever get arrested for prostitution?
Absolutely,
Okay.
yes. I'm not proud of that by any means.
No,
No,
I'm just
but
getting
see,
the whole thing.
but
Yeah.
what I'm saying is back then you were charged with prostitution. It's very different now.
Luckily, yeah, the cops are getting on
Yes,
top of the people. Like, I think cops are starting to realize, like, oh, she's not
that
the
women
one
are.
doing this. It's the people that are other people. I think there's been enough
There's a
stories.
there's usually somebody over it.
Yeah,
You know what
just
I'm saying?
because you're a prostitute doesn't mean you're doing it on your own. You're usually doing it because you're being forced against your will and being told we're going to kill you unless you go out in the streets.
Absolutely, absolutely. There was so much fear, and you got to remember this took place down south, and you know, things are looked at very, very differently down in the south.
Oh yeah,
Very
I
differently.
lived in Durham for a year.
Yes, and that's not it. Yes, in the deep south, it's looked at very, very, very differently. A lot of people still in Greenville County. Um,
Are they into like victim blaming where what did you do?
Absolutely, absolutely. But they don't realize the trauma that that comes along with it. They don't realize that we're being told our children are going to be killed.
Yeah.
You know, um,
How many children do you have?
I have two, and my son. I'm very proud of him. He actually lives in Alabama now. Uh, he look, his mom got sent to Alabama. I was like, man, I don't know anything about Alabama. And then my son married somebody from Alabama, and and then moved to Alabama.
Yeah.
And then I come back to Griffith County. So I don't know. It's just kind of funny. And his wife, well, she
Oh, I
before
know how
she,
messed up your county is. I had a woman on my I met a woman in real life that was from Greenwood County and
that's Greenville County. Greenwood Wood it's close to Greenville.
oh okay. It's one of the greens.
Hmm.
Her husband accidentally discharged his gun and killed her daughter. And he was serving no jail time whatsoever. And
Hmm.
she was convinced that that bullet was meant for her and it wasn't accidental. And nobody will investigate it
Hmm.
because they're just like saying, "No, it was an accident." And he's part of the church. So
Right.
if you're part of the church and you're friends with the pastor, you have like carte blanche to get in trouble because the pastor will then take your side and go to the authorities and say, "Oh, blah 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 is a good guy because he's part of our church and he's great for the clergy and whatever."
Yeah. You know, yeah, I mean, you know,
So how do you
I
feel
was
to how do you
taken,
feel today, Kelly? 5 years
I,
away from it, how do you feel today about everything?
um, I'm healing.
Are you
I'm
grateful
healing.
for your experiences because they taught you lessons,
Yes,
or
yes. Because had I not been through what I went through, um, because along with this, the generational curses that I'm talking about, um, came anxiety, depression, severe depression. I'm
yeah,
talking about where I couldn't even pick myself up out of the bed. So my sister and I, we um we self medicated for a long time, and you know, my my sister was nearly cut in half 6 months ago.
because
My
of the accident?
Yes,
Was it a
and
car accident?
it sure was, and it devastated me.
Who was
It
at fault
it
for the
sent me in,
accident?
it sent me into another relapse, and
Gotcha.
I'm blaming my sister for that. Um, it was very difficult for me. I I hit the floor, and I let out a scream. Let me say this: I let out a scream. This is really all I remember because when I found out that my sister uh, was dying, I remember letting out a scream. It was like ear piercing. It was like a scream that was so gut wrenching. And I remember hitting the floor, and it was so painful for me. Um, when I hit the floor, it was just so unreal to be an identical twin, and that pain. Well, I, I can't even I can't even describe how painful that was, uh, because I wanted to die. I wanted to die to die. I was like, I can't live without my twin sister. You have to be a twin to understand this,
Mm.
and to go through the traumas we went through, and and when I got to that hospital and I saw my sister, and she was still opened up, because this seatbelt literally cut her in half.
I believe it.
Uh,
That's why I don't wear a seatbelt. Is
yeah, well,
because yeah. I mean, I'm a big guy anyway, so like technically I don't have to wear a seatbelt. But I've never gotten pulled over. Well, I should say never. I mean, I always get I always get pulled over, and never has the cop said like, "Where's your seatbelt at?" I've never gotten a seat. I think they know the seatbelt is going to cause me more harm than good because it can take off my head if it was in the wrong, kind of
well,
accident.
uh, it was below her stomach, and I mean,
Yeah.
the way she wore it, and I believe the top was behind her,
Mm.
and so she just had the belt. And when the accident happened, um, she was literally almost cut in half.
Can I ask who was at fault of the accident? If it was her or if it was somebody else?
It was my sister.
Okay.
But you know, so she's still dealing with her trauma of the accident. Um, so our stories, they continue to go on
Yeah.
as as we go through life, and uh, that storm, you know, uh, um, of her life. I remember hitting my knees, and I was like, God, I can't take this. I cannot take any more pain in my life. You know, God, why? Why am I going through this pain? Why am I suffering this life like this? And I remember screaming it out. Why? Why am I going through this life? And you know, I just know that my story, it hasn't ended.
Nope.
It has not ended, this story. And he did save my sister's life. And you know, she should have never survived that accident. Never survived. So I'm grateful. You know, uh, you know, it's a tough life in this world today.
Oh
It's
yeah.
tougher than it was in the '80s. Way tougher. And
Social
you know,
media, people can't like hide anymore. Like they used to be able to hide. Like I've heard of like people growing up where the dad left, and then you find out that the dad lives around the corner with somebody new, but you didn't know that for 18 years
my
because.
dad lives in Spartanburg, right up the road from me.
Yep.
I know where he's at, but you know, he's
What's
been
the
gone
point?
out of our lives for 3 years
Yeah.
after 48 years.
So why is there anything, if I can ask, specific that he is not? in contact with you, or are you not in contact with him? Which one is it?
No, he remarried. I guess the woman he was having the affair with. He
Mm-hmm.
remarried, and he's in an even more, violent
Okay.
type of situation. So he's not free to to. I don't think he's free to contact us. Um, you know. So
Well, you're starting to break the generational curse. That's the most important thing. I think one of the hardest things is admitting that there's a generational curse in your family.
I know
I
this.
I don't have to live that way, but I can be sympathetic towards ones that do because I've heard all the stories, and everybody has their unique story, and that's why I have this show.
Right.
It's important for me to put out stories like yours or help you tell the story because sometimes it can be so hard to try to tell that story. So I always will. I don't mean to pry. I'm
No,
trying
it's
to just
okay.
help you.
It's okay. You know, uh,
Your story is your story. You
yes,
know, maybe, and your sister's story is your sister's story.
right.
Everyone, even when you're twins, you both have unique experiences where you're going to have different outlooks on things sometimes because you both were had generational trauma, and it's a shame, but at the same time, I'm glad that you have each other as
Oh, yes.
opposed to like only one of you dealing with the abuse as opposed to both of you. At least you can both say to each other, I know what you're like, I know what you're
I
feeling, I
know
know
how
how you,
you're
yeah.
feeling. Right. Uh, Um, my hope is that even if one person hears my story and says, "Hey, you know, I can feel what she's feeling." Uh, um, I believe this is my belief. Um, God puts it. God puts us in this season, you know, and um, He gives us a story sometimes, and you know, it, you know, um, I hope to one day work with women who have been human trafficked or had some type of abuse, like my sister and I did, and they can say, "Hey, I, I, I experience the same thing, even if it's just a little bit different." And say, "Hey, um, I
Well,
can survive this. I can
and
survive."
it's never too early to start talking because some of the pain that you're feeling can be lifted as soon as you start helping others.
Yes.
As soon as you start doing some like outreach where you're talking to other women like yourself, that's when the healing gets even more in depth because you're going to see yourself more in these people and you're going to want, like, I can see myself in anybody.
Mm,
Even though I wasn't abused as a child, I have great family life. I grew up a happy kid, going to sports and whatever, going on vacations with my family. However, my story involves grief and loss. So I can connect with people, especially if they've had a lot of problems with losing people in their lives and not knowing how to deal with it. And
yes.
I've been able to get myself through a lot of things just by talking to people like myself.
And my story goes much deeper. It goes it, it's a lot more traumatic, but I just wanted to touch the surface,
Yeah, to at least
and
get
that
it.
was right. And
And I appreciate you divulging what you felt comfortable divulging.
right. And there's just you know, uh you know, but there is sobriety. You know, you can get it. You just have to, you really have to want it. And
Not need it. It's important to distinguish needs and wants. We need water, we need food, we need shelter. Those are all needs. But you can't, if you say to me you need to be sober, it's a bad sign because you're doing it for somebody else. And
yeah,
as soon as you, like, say you're doing it for your wife, and as soon as your wife leaves you, you have nothing to do with nobody to be sober for because the person you were hanging your hat on for your sobriety just left. So
mhm.
what's left is to
Or
drink.
died, left, died, you know, and then that grief that takes over,
And
and
then
you're
you're back
feeling
to using and drinking again.
absolutely.
So it's important to want it, not need it, because when you
For
want
me,
it, yeah,
the
exactly.
word I want to say is I craved it.
Oh,
I
okay,
was
yeah.
like, you know, I wanted to be one of those people, you know, um, you know, I was like, I saw all the people around me that were sober, and I was like, I need that. I want that, and I need that in my life. I just didn't know how.
Yeah.
I just didn't know how. And
You knew the why, but you didn't know the how.
I
And
didn't know
I
how.
feel like you know the how and you have a better understanding of the how now.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But it's taken me years, you know, walking that path.
Yeah.
It's not an easy road. It is not an easy road. And have I had relapses? You better believe it. Um, have I it's not an easy road. You
No.
know, but when you finally get that sobriety and learn about addiction, really learn about addiction, uh, and what causes all these things, you know, um, all the words that they use and any kind of uh, whether it's AA, NA,
Celebrate
celebrate
recovery.
recovery, whatever you choose to use for sobriety, when they're teaching you these things, you know, at first you're like, oh well, yeah, you know, but it sinks in.
Yeah.
It finally sinks in, and you're like, hey, I did that. Hey, I felt that way. You know, hey, I understand about this and this and this.
Well, you know the
Words that they
difference.
use,
You
huh?
know the difference is some people are in the rooms of AA or NA because they have to get a cord slip
Oh,
signed.
no, yeah,
So
yeah,
they're not there to learn anything. They're there to get something signed. When you're there and you're looking for a message, that means when I used to talk a lot at meetings. Like I would be the speaker at meetings and doing like the hour long telling my story. And I feel like what was my point to this? Is that the more you tell your story, the more okay with it you're gonna get.
right, right, right. Um, you know, for me, see, like now I have a mentor. I, you know, I have somebody that I can reach out to
Yep.
without judgment.
Kind of like a sponsor.
Yes, I have what's called a mentor, and you know, I can talk to her about anything. At first, we were strangers, you know, and but she's been in my life for a year now. But now she's family.
Yep.
I can I can I can reach out to her and say, hey, uh, um, uh, this happened in my life, and I'm feeling this way. and I'm fixing to go use, you know, um, I feel safe with her.
Yeah,
And there's
it's
a big,
important to surround. We always say that you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
right.
So if you're spending time with a bunch of people that are using or drinking, even if you're not,
Yeah,
you're going to be enabled to go out and drink and use with this. Now,
it's true.
it's
It's true. What you're
uh,
saying is true.
but if you surround yourself by a bunch of sober people, guess what the last thing you want to do is get high or drunk because of everybody's being so positive, and the entire time you're like, oh, I can do that too, I can be part of this circle. And it's so important to find a network of people in the community that you can be friends with and not judge you for your past, and instead help you use your past as a tool to not go back out and drink and use again.
Absolutely. Um, uh, that is very. What is it? That saying? Birds of a feather flock
Flock.
together.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's true. When I started hanging around people that were using drugs, um, that's when my drug addiction got so bad. And you have to remember, addiction in my family was a generational curse, I believe.
Yep.
My mom was an alcoholic. My my grandfather was a raging alcoholic for years, and it went on the other side too of my family.
Yeah.
And so that 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 was a big part of it, you know, uh, uh, the trauma and addiction and all that just fell in together, and it just made a big old soup bowl.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, um, you know, of just some horrible things. So,
Well, either way, I appreciate you spending the time to sit down and talk about, maybe you couldn't cover anything for legal reasons or whatever, but I appreciate you divulging what you did divulge,
thank you.
because I think if one person listening or one person's watching that can be affected by this in a positive way, that's all that really matters. So,
I see. I didn't have a license for years.
yeah,
A license for years. Uh, but in the last 3 years, I've gotten my license back. Um, I got sober. I got my license back. I will not, you know, I will not lose my license again,
yep,
because in South Carolina they don't play.
nope,
They do
nope.
not play when it comes to the legalities of, you know. So, anyways, thank you for
Oh, of course.
hearing my story.
It's always my pleasure.